Welcome back to Push Box Banter. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Craig.
And there's no race this week, Craig.
I know. I'm smiling right now because we just started our talk, but I'm sad inside because there's no race.
There's no racing, but lots of action off track.
Yes.
Yes. Lots of happenings, and lots of things developing with Christian Horner.
That's true. Mm-hmm. He likes to be in the news, I think. And if not, it's unfortunate for him then because he is. I don't think he's likes to be in the news for this. So.
Probably for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. I know that some people say any news is good news when you're talking about celebrities or public figure type things.
Right.
I don't think that this would be good news for him
not all
necessarily because it kind of keeps a
attention.
bad type of thing in public eyes.
And it just keeps coming back. He cannot escape it.
It's like a new thing almost every day. It seems like every few days, it seems like something new is coming out.
It definitely seems like something new is coming out every day. I mean, today is Saturday. We're recording, and we found out the complainant, the staffer, has filed a formal allegation against him with the FIA.
Wow. Yeah.
So we know that Red Bull GmbH had basically dismissed those claims, but it seems like she's taking it a step further and addressing it with the FIA. So for those that don't know, the FIA is the governing body of Formula One. So it's interesting to see where it's going to go, but hopefully it gets resolved in a hasty fashion.
Yeah,
because I think we're kind of tired of, I don't know about you, but definitely I'm kind of over it. Like at this point, it's been in the news cycle for a good 2 weeks. Like it's got to die off at some point.
Yeah, at some point you would think that it would. I know it was interesting in some respects before the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, whenever they're talking with Christian and the other his peers, and they're all down and being interviewed in front of the media, and question after question after question were all directed towards him over this topic, and the other guys are just kind of sitting there like twiddling their thumbs. I think they may have gotten like one, maybe two questions to them, and that's how stuff like this goes. But it's kind of uncomfortable watching it. Like you're kind of like, okay, guys, like he can't say anything, and let's let it go. Let's talk to some of the other things. There's more stories out there, but it is interesting to see because it does impact other people, other teams. If Max is really ticked off, like where does he go? Does he go to Mercedes? I don't know, but with that being opened up, it does somewhat give him some leverage. But there's also all these other guys that are vying for those seats as well, or potentially, or at least going to use it for contract negotiations or try
definitely
to help them. So, you've got you got Alonso.
Definitely, Alonso would be a huge asset for the team. Maybe in the short term. Mm-hmm. I don't anticipate him being in Formula One forever.
How long do you think? He's been around for so long and he's had so much success. Like, how long do you think he's going to keep driving?
Oh, I think he's got another 5 years in him.
You think? Seriously, like, is he's eight? Because he's what? How old is he? He's 38, 39, something like that. How much longer do you think he can last till he's 45? If he keeps driving, he's going to be used to it. If he takes off another time or for a year or two, I think that's probably it.
Like he says, he compares everything to being lions, and he's got the heart of a lion. And I think he can go. I really think he can go on.
I just have to pause and say that's hilarious that he says these things.
Yeah,
I
know.
I love Alonso for his sayings.
Correct. Yeah. No. He's.
Sorry to interrupt you, but. Yeah. So Alonso,
you can't stop Alonso. Mm-hmm. And then you have Sainz. Sainz right now is coming out of a surgery. But also, which is really not a great timing for him because he was, he's coming off of getting kicked out of Ferrari, right?
Yeah.
He had a great first race, and then in Saudi Arabia, he had another opportunity to maybe extend his lead over his teammate. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we saw that he couldn't race. He had an appendix issue
Mm-hmm.
and had surgery. So we think he's going to be in Australia. We'd like to see him. And I think I mentioned in our last week's podcast that I think he's going to be probably vying for third
Mm-hmm.
ahead of Leclerc, in my opinion. But I see him being a front runner for the Mercedes seat for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a better fit for that seat other than Sainz. Alonso again would be great. He understands the machinery. Uh, he can get in any car
Mm-hmm.
and go really fast. But he's also a bit of a loose cannon when it comes to his words and things like that. So he could be,
Mm-hmm.
he could be maybe a little bit of a headache for Toto. And Sainz is, I feel, very much a company man.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to drive the car. He's not going to make excuses, and I think he brings a lot to the table. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Signs is a really interesting option. I think he's, yeah. I mean, I think longer term, like, okay, so the Mercedes seat to me, there's talk of, the Wonder Kid coming up. And so, if Alonso, like, if they really feel strongly about this kid coming up, that he's going to be the next Verstappen,
Right.
Alonso seems like it may make a little bit more sense because it may be a shorter term that he's there. But Signs, if they're thinking, Signs to me seems like he's going to be around longer to wherever he goes, or has the potential to be around longer because I think he's on the upswing of his career.
Yeah, I think he's on the upswing, but at the same time, he's almost been this unfulfilled potential on the grid for a couple of years now, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually very, very interesting situation. If you do have Alonso for another year, give him a 1-year contract, and then have, I think his name is Andrea Kimi, Antonelli, and you give the Wonder Kid maybe a year in a feeder team first, and then have him step up to the plate and match Russell in that team, and have Russell as that older, experienced driver, and Kimi as the younger up and comer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that idea a lot. And Science is going to do enough. And he does a lot of in the cockpit strategy. So maybe he's better in a midfield team to bring a team up.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's a very smooth operator when he's out there, and he's great. So, yeah, I mean, what about some of the other people? I mean, let's see, Albon. You think he's like primed for Mercedes?
I think Albon is a hot commodity. I think any team that gets him will be benefiting from everything he learned at Red Bull, and going to a smaller team like Williams, and really driving that car beyond, I think, its limits.
Yeah.
And but he also hasn't been challenged much. He was challenged at Red Bull. Obviously, that didn't go well. The car is a little different, suited to Max. And at Williams, his benchmark is Sargent. So we all love Sargent. We don't
Yes,
talk
we do.
bad, but Sargent's the little brother, right? So we don't talk bad to him, but about him. But yet, he's the benchmark, and that's not a high benchmark for him. So could he do better at another team like Mercedes? I think he would be a really excellent fit if Kimi weren't in the picture. And Toto Wolff has really talked this kid up.
Yeah.
Almost too much. I think I read somewhere where Toto mentioned maybe talking about him too much, that he might have made a mistake because everybody's now expecting to see him.
Yeah.
And I think he was at one of the testings in Imola, like this past week, actually.
Oh,
Yeah. So they were photographed together. So we'll see what happens there. And then you have other oddball, it's silly season. So you can see we have how many? 13? We have 13 drivers out of contract, and we could see any one of those potentially filling that seat. We've got the Alpine drivers, Ocon, Gasly. I don't want to speak for them. I don't know, but I'm sure they won out, Craig.
Yeah, I mean, if it means they can stay in F1, I think that they would. I think, yeah, I'm not sure if both of them will have opportunities elsewhere. But I mean, they may both really enjoy driving backwards around a racetrack. Or only being able to get out of into sixth gear, not into eighth. I don't know. Maybe they love the slower speeds. That way they can drink their iced tea or their matcha as they drive around the track.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but there's Who do you think they would go to?
Oh goodness. I could see them. I could see one of them maybe at Audi or maybe even Haas. I just don't really see. You don't see them at a top team. I don't see them in a top team. I don't see them at a Ferrari, at a Mercedes, at a McLaren. Where do you put them? Yeah. Maybe Aston Martin if you have that opening from Alonso. I could see him. Yeah, Sauber, Aston Martin, Audi. I think that's probably it.
So out of the drivers that are going to be out of a contract, which ones do you think are like on the bubble of not being in the 20 seats, being off the grid?
Oh man, this is rough. Obviously, you don't want to see anybody lose their seat because it's so hard when they lose their seat to come back, and it's happened, but it doesn't happen that often. So we've seen it a few times, but once you're out, it's more or less like game over. You're never coming back. Mostly, I think Zhou is probably not going to come back.
Yeah.
I don't know that he has any fan appeal. I don't know exactly what his situation is with his sponsors, or even with the whole country of China. I don't know what Audi would get from having him in that team, or that he brings anything other than fans. I don't see it. I don't see him making an impact anywhere on the grid. And then you have Sargent.
Yeah, Sargent.
What do you think about Sargent? I know that's your driver.
Well, it kind of is my driver. I like to pull for Sargent because he's the lone American that's out there. Got to pull for him, and he's also a younger driver. It's his second year, so he's I want to see him do well. I want to see him have his fair chance and everything. But when you're at this level, like you've got to perform. And I guess a thing that worries me about him is like when he does have problems in his car, like when the brakes were going bad for him and they're asking him, what went wrong? What's going on? And he's like, I don't know. And that type of stuff, like that to me is a little disturbing because I'm like, dude, you got to know what's going on with your car, or at least be able to communicate what you think's going on.
Right.
But at the same time, like it's good that he's honest about, hey, he doesn't know. But those are some things that I'm like, oh, come on, man, step it up. You got to step it up a little bit. But yeah, I think he's on the bubble. And if he's not with Williams, I don't see him going anywhere. Like unless like literally nobody wants to get in the Alpine again, then maybe to stay on the grid. But that seems like it might be a career killer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Outside of the team he's in now, at most, if he brings any backing with him, maybe Haas, like you said, maybe Alpine if they're really bad. If there even is an Alpine next year, who knows, right?
It would be kind of cool if he did go to Haas because it's the only American-owned team.
Yeah, that would make the most sense.
Sort of, that'd be kind of cool.
No, for sure. We want to be able to represent with an American driver on the grid for sure.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's a good point because the American fan base has really grown. The sport pretty dramatically. So having those ties may actually help him keep his seat.
Absolutely, and he's like your all-American guy. Like,
he is. He's like the guy
literally Logan Sargent. Like
I know
you cannot make
his
this
name,
up.
everything,
his
like
name,
the way he
his
looks,
presentation, everything.
He's like the guy that you want to be friends with.
Yeah, definitely
want to hang out with. But
hey, let's go to the bar.
Yeah, seems like the cool guy to have around.
Yeah.
No, so there's some other guys too, like Ricardo. The guy's like super cool personality wise. I could see him being on TV all the time. Like he seems like somebody that everybody really likes. The problem is like his performance continues to seem like it's dropping off. It's going the wrong direction. And the other things like you constantly hear him kind of complaining about something's not right with the setup. We got to adjust a little here, adjust a little there. Okay, I mean, it's maybe very valid, but you continue to hear that with the different teams that he's been on. At some point, even if it's valid, and I think the point is starting now, people are like, well, maybe it's not the setup.
Right.
And that may be a wrong conclusion, but that's what the conclusion is coming to because his teammate is doing better than him. And then when you see, well, a couple of races ago, and they tell him, they make Sonoda allow him to pass so he can overtake the car in front of him, and he can't even do that, and he's on soft tires. It makes things look bad or look worse than what they may actually be.
It doesn't do him any favors for sure.
Yeah.
To be losing against Sonoda. Sonoda's a fast driver, and he's another person who's going to be potentially out of a seat, vying for Perez's seat. But Ricciardo, I feel for him. He, like you said, he's not doing any better than he actually got put on notice by Helmut this last weekend. He got put on notice. He got called out, and if he doesn't change it up soon, I wouldn't be surprised. Red Bull's very notorious for chopping drivers mid-season.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if we don't see Ricciardo at the end of the season. So, and I think Sonoda, as long as he keeps his head on, he'll be okay. I think he'll be on the grid. I'm not totally concerned about him. I think he's got a little bit of obviously you got the Honda backing. If it's not Red Bull, it might still be RB or maybe even like some other team. I think they'd be happy to have him, especially with the ties with Honda. I think he's set. The Haas drivers, Magnussen, Hulkenberg. Hulkenberg is one of those few exceptions that has left and did come back after a couple years out, was a super sub for a little bit. And he hasn't really done a whole lot.
No.
Aside from the last point he got with Magnussen's help, he's been not really delivering. So I could see him being without a seat, especially being, Hulkenberg and Magnussen being in a customer team. I think they've got probably the most to worry about because you've got Behrman. Right in their rearview mirror.
Now, why do you think he's going to go? Do you think that he's going to end up at Haas?
I absolutely think he's going to end up at Haas, especially with Hamilton in that seat already, and Leclerc's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. So Haas is the only direction for Behrman. And again, you have two seats going there, Hulkenberg, Magnussen. It's the most obvious thing that they'd want to keep maybe an experienced driver and then maybe bring in Behrman.
I think that would be really good for Haas.
Guntner was saying that,
talk about the publicity for them. Just that alone.
Yeah, major publicity. And if he's any good, he will definitely, drive that car better than the current folks there, or at least the one experienced person that they have, which would probably be Magnussen, or maybe Hulkenberg. I mean, it's who's to say it's any of the two, but as long as he doesn't pull a Nick DeVries, I think he's going to be set. And we've seen, I can see him being another Albon, driving the car past its limits and, being the benchmark, being the true benchmark for that team.
I mean, Perez is one that we have not talked about.
Perez is a big question mark. I think he's going to stay.
I would hope so. I mean, he was second place in the championship last year.
Yeah.
I think he'll probably be there at second place again. But then at the same time, like, because of all the turmoil that's around his team,
Yeah.
Like it really puts kind of some question marks around that. Like, does he want to stay? Would be one that nobody really asks. But
Yeah.
two is like, do they want him to stay?
That's interesting.
You know?
I think I think he benefits from all of this.
Yeah.
I think all of this happening is to the benefit of Sergio and his outfit. So think of I think of Horner and being backed into a corner, right? He's being backed into a corner by Helmut, the people, the Austrian ownership, and Joss, the Verstappen's, and even Max to a degree, right? Horner's already mentioned, there's not one person bigger than the organization and just the team itself. So if there's an ally that has a huge backing, and I mean backing as in like fan backing and financial backing, his ally would be Perez, right? So who stands to benefit from being in that corner? I think it's Sergio.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, you have Helmut in control of the drivers. So I don't know that that's going to be any benefit. But I think as long as Perez gets second and has just like a sergeant moment where he's doing everything and doing everything right, I don't see why they would change him. Because every other driver that they've put not only next to Max, which is hard enough, but put in that car that, as we were talking earlier, is unstable and it's nervous in the rear, and it's really only made for Max, that car.
Yeah.
The fact that he can control it and still, remove Max and still be winning, I think he should stay.
Do you think he goes if they say bye?
Oh my goodness!
Or if Perez is like, "Hey, this is enough drama for me. I'm going someplace else."
I don't think that's the case. The second part, I don't think the drama will be a factor for him. I think if it's just like, okay, this is the end of the line for him, you're a free agent. I personally like him for the Mercedes seat. I think he'd be an excellent fit. He's already driven for some of their customer teams, the old excuse me, the old Force India Racing Point team. So, at one point he drove the Mercedes 2.0 car when he was at Racing Point. So I see him being an excellent fit or something like that. It's either Red Bull, I think, maybe Audi, and maybe he retires. I don't know.
Yeah.
And hopefully not. I think he's got another 5 years in him too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's still driving great.
Oh yeah, definitely. For sure.
Yeah. What about so as all these people, as they shift around and they go to different teams and so forth, what do you think, as far as fan loyalty goes? Like, I've got a friend that's a huge Hamilton fan.
Okay.
And I asked him, I was like, yeah, what do you think? And it's been a bit since I've talked to him, but I was like, which do you pull for? Do you pull more for Hamilton? Do you pull more for Mercedes? They're like, oh, Mercedes. Like, okay. So, how do you think fan loyalty is going to go with Hamilton shifting over to Ferrari? And how do you think fan loyalty goes with some of these other drivers? I think it's more maybe greater fan loyalty with some of the better teams versus some of the lower end teams may not have quite as great fan loyalty.
As far as Hamilton, I think himself has a huge fan base, especially in England, right? I think he's going to bring that with him. I don't see many people as true Mercedes fans. I think a lot of folks are Hamilton fans.
Yeah.
And we might just see those people be coming to Fussies as well.
Yeah.
Right. That's my take. I don't know. I'm neither a Hamilton fan or a big Ferrari fan, but I could see him bringing in more people. I mean, again, everybody's a Ferrari fan at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Even if you're not, you are. You want to see it's the truth.
Yeah.
You regardless, you want to see that red car somewhere on the top. So it's only going to be better for Ferrari. And I think it's a good move. It's a good move for them in the short term. Again, it's, I don't know how long his contract's for. Do you?
I don't remember.
I don't know either, but regardless, he's going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to give Leclerc a run for his money.
You think?
Definitely.
Yeah.
100%.
We've had some other interesting news this week.
Yeah.
And this other piece of interesting news takes us back a little bit.
Yeah.
Back into the aughts, 2008. Which, by the way, side note, I got this cool little gift from Kilbourne Exchange, some tumblers. So, and then put our little logo on here.
Nice.
So, yeah. Keeps things hot, keeps things cold.
Thanks to our sponsors.
Yes.
We got to pay the bills, guys.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's see. So 2008, going back in time a little bit to some news that just resurfaced, came out, however you want to put it.
It's a bit of a nightmare, really.
Yeah?
Yeah. So a lot of us are familiar with Felipe Massa. For those that are not, Felipe Massa was a racing car driver for a very long time.
How good was he?
He was very mediocre.
Very mediocre career, huh?
Yeah, I mean, he was good.
Yeah.
It was never great, but he was very good. Just, vanilla good, like very just good.
Good enough to hang
good
around.
enough to hang around, good enough to excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Good enough to be a driver for Ferrari for a long time.
Nice.
And he drove for Williams as well towards the end of his career. And I was fortunate enough to see him for a lot of it. But in 2008 in Singapore, where do we begin? Do we want to start with what's happening today? Because the reason we're talking about this is because Felipe Massa is now suing Bernie Ecclestone and the FIA over a championship that was lost to Lewis Hamilton by 1 point.
Yeah.
In 2008, right? So,
now, of course, it's a championship that he would have won if the situation that we're going to talk about would have happened. So we're talking about, a championship lost that he's going to sue over.
Yeah, and it's we might want to call him a sore loser or things like that. It's like, why are we doing this like 15 years later, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's been, I guess, information that surfaced. We found out that the top guy in Formula One, Bernie Ecclestone, knew about the said situation the year that it happened, and because he did nothing about it where he should have, it cost Massa the championship by 1 point, and so now he's suing, and we anticipate that it's going to be a nasty fight, and probably it's going to cost Massa a lot of money, and he might get a payout from Formula One because though it's not written in stone that his lawsuit's going to go on and be successful, the issue at hand is kind of messy. It's just really, really messy.
So what's the situation that he thinks that they knew about and did him wrong over, that he's suing over?
So let's unfold the situation a little bit, and let's go back in time for story time with Daniel.
Yes.
With Pushbox Banter.
Yes.
So what we saw was in 2008, it was the first Singapore Grand Prix. It was the first night race.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. And Felipe Massa starting in pole position. Lewis Hamilton was second. And the race started off as normal. At 1 point, Felipe Massa was 5 seconds ahead of Hamilton.
What?
Yeah. So we know that Massa was, he was leading the race. He was having a good race. Nothing was going on that was interesting to that point. We expected him to maybe come out with some points ahead of Hamilton, but Fernando Alonso back then newcomer to the sport.
Yeah.
Okay. Had a teammate. His name is Nelson Piquet Jr. Now, side note, I don't know if you know who Nelson Piquet is.
No.
Okay, so Nelson Piquet is was a former Formula One driver, father of Nelson Piquet Jr.
Okay.
All right. He's also the father of Kelly Piquet. Do you know who Kelly Piquet
No.
is?
Who is Kelly Piquet?
Kelly Piquet is the sister of Nelson Piquet Jr.
Really?
But more importantly, she's the girlfriend of Max Verstappen.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
They're Brazilian. They're Brazilian racing family.
Okay.
Right? And she's like, super fashion model and things like that. Anyway, his Nelson Piquet's son, Nelson Piquet Jr., and Fernando Alonso were teammates at Renault during this time. Okay, and Renault is led by this guy named Flavio
Flavio Ballatore?
Flavio Briatore.
Okay.
Briatore. Yes.
Okay.
Very hard name. But Flavio Briatore had conspired with Nelson Piquet Jr. To crash intentionally around the 15th lap.
Why on earth is he having them crash?
So the strategy, they basically, I mean, later more of this information came out, but what happened earlier in the race, we had Fernando Alonso take an early pit stop. And in those days, the cars needed to not only have a tire changed, but they also had to have fuel added. Okay. So they were heavier, they had more fuel. They were being refueled during the pit stops. So Fernando Alonso, earlier on, around the 12th or 13th lap, went to go refuel and go to get his pit stop. So Flavio had Nelson Piquet Jr. crash intentionally right before the pit window opened, so it forced a safety car, and forced it in a way that some of the other drivers, some of the other teams had it forced everybody to get pit stops, right? Because it's just like what happened in Saudi, where there was an earlier than expected safety car, and that kind of forces everybody to pit right away to avoid having a really long pit stop, right?
Okay.
Because you end up saving like half the time. So if you don't, everybody else does, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
You're going to be way at the back of the field if you don't pit stop. However, if you already pitted, then you don't have to do that anymore. So guess what? Everybody gets out of your way, right? And you end up very high up in the grid, and everybody has to now overtake you. Yeah, they're going to be with a little bit more gas and with a little bit fresher tires, but you're even, right? So Fernando having started like 15th in qualifying, so he started 15th on the grid, was now up like, if not leading, very close to leading. I think he was either really high up. And, Nelson Piquet Jr. had a DNF, the safety car came. And during the pit stops, you had Felipe Massa go pit, and on his pit stop, the hose got stuck to his car. Oh my gosh. So he left. He left the pit, and the hose was stuck. So his team, the mechanics, had to run across the pit stop, the pit lane, take it off, and then he rejoined the field, and he rejoined like in 13th place or something like that, right? Or actually at the end of the field.
So like going into this, he was basically in first.
So he was leading
out in 13th.
And no, he was leading and ended up he ended up leaving the pits last.
Okay.
He ended up at the end of the race. He was 13th.
Okay.
I think, but
leaving the pits.
He was
because he still had that fuel thing.
He had the fuel thing attached to his car. And then you have Lewis Hamilton, no issues with his pit stop, ended up a little higher. Was a little higher, after that pit stop. So this happens. the race goes on. Felipe, he's rocking and rolling, passing people. He ends up finishing like 13th. Lewis Hamilton ends up finishing third, and Fernando Alonso wins the first Singapore Grand Prix.
Nice.
Then, fast forward 2009, Nelson Piquet Jr. gets dropped by Renault.
Okay.
By the same guy who told him to crash, by Flavio Briatore. Briatore, yeah. So he gets dropped, and guess what he does? Or guess what Nelson does?
Starts talking,
starts spilling the beans.
Nice.
Starts spilling the beans and starts, he thinks he's in. He thinks he's locked in with Renault because of the situation, right? They say, nope, we're going to drop you. He starts talking to the media in Brazil. And it's just a storm of legal stuff and problems for Renault from then on. They banned them technically for 2 years. Wow. They banned Flavio Briatore for I think another 5 years, and one of his engineers as well. And they end up not really making it. They don't really fight it too much, though. Later on, some of those bans were kind of taken to court, and then they were mitigated. They mitigated them down.
Yeah, you got to make a little bit of a penalty because you don't want people intentionally wrecking all the time.
Correct. No. So it was the first instance, at least known instance, of fabricating a result in Formula One.
Wow.
So they call it Crashgate, and it was just an incredible happening that occurred in the sport. So at the end of the 2008 season, though, Felipe Massa got overtaken in the last race, which is Brazil, in the last lap by Lewis Hamilton. Okay, so leading up to the last race, Felipe was winning the battle for the championship, lost it in the last lap, and lost the championship by 1 point.
Oh, man.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, Felipe, why are we causing this big thing now, right? Like, it's 15 years later.
Yeah.
Well, normally when something like that happens in the next year, because everything was found out in 2009.
Yeah.
So, what recently came out was that Bernie Ecclestone knew about the situation. Bernie Ecclestone's the head of Formula One, okay?
Okay.
So he knew about the situation in 2008 when this happened, not when Nelson Piquet had come out with it in 2009.
Oh,
so now it's a different story, right? Now it's like, okay, now it's like borderline corruption and just a big fuss. And that's what's happening now is you have Felipe Massa suing Bernie Ecclestone, I believe the FIA, and a couple other parties. So really, really, really sad situation again for the sport, all within the span of, again, 2 weeks with what's happening with Horner and what's happening with Felipe Massa and what we found out about Bernie Ecclestone. And we know Bernie Ecclestone was quite the character, but to allow that to happen is a huge, black eye for the sport. And the sport and the FIA have seen a lot of really controversial things happening since Abu Dhabi, and now with this Felipe Massa allegation about 2008. But what's more interesting, though, is our guy Flavio Briatore.
Yeah.
So very, I don't know if you know anything about him, but he was a very interesting guy, and really, I guess, allegedly a mastermind of this situation, right? Him and his race engineers and things like that. But he was the managing director at the time and also owned part of Queen's Park Rangers, which is a top tier football team in England.
Oh, interesting.
In the Premier League. Yeah.
Okay.
So But after he got banned, he actually got banned, got it reversed, got paid,
Okay.
but never came back. So, just left his mark and just said, okay, I'm just, this isn't fair. He got paid and then he never came back. But in 2022, he came back as an ambassador for the sport.
Interesting.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
What's more interesting is that he had a very interesting life between that time and him becoming an ambassador. He married.
What way?
Oh, well, do you know Heidi Klum?
Yes. Not personally, unfortunately. But
Well, he has a daughter with Heidi Klum.
really?
Yes. And he married the model for Wonder Bra.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting. He had a kid with Heidi Klum, and Seal raised, Seal,
Yeah.
the musician,
musician,
who
yeah.
ended up raising his child basically
Wow.
with Heidi. And that's a very interesting little side note about
Yeah, right.
Flavio and the issues happening, circling back with Felipe Massa.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Gosh,
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah.
That is.
A very interesting story. Full circle with Nelson PK, Nelson Jr. And again, to kind of wrap it up right now, Felipe Massa, I don't know if it's current, but very recently was driving stock cars in Brazil, which happens to be something that Nelson PK Jr. is also currently doing.
Really interesting.
Very interesting connections.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Huh. If you were Massa, would you do that? Would you file the suit, do you think? At this point? I mean, some people have commented a little bit about, hey, why is he doing this now? He's got to get some money, that type of thing. And
Sure.
I mean, you get money, but it's also costly. Like if you're going to do a lawsuit, you gotta
That type of
pay a lot
lawsuit.
and you're paying lawyers big money to do that.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know that he's going to come out a winner from any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the stat books are going to change. I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to come out of it other than, hey, you can't do this. Like I think it's a I got robbed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a grievance.
Yeah.
And so at first, before I was well informed of what had happened in what they call Crashgate in Singapore, I was under the impression that he was more of a cry, like a little crybaby, a little whiny, and he's been known to be like that, especially in like press briefings and debriefs, very, tattle type of thing. And you've seen, I don't know if you've seen any interviews, but with him, but it doesn't strike me as something that he wouldn't do, but I get it.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Craig, I'm excited for Australia. It's going to be awesome. We know Behrman's going to be there.
Yeah.
Behrman's going to be there.
Is he going to be racing?
He's going to be racing anyway.
He's going to be racing F2.
Yeah, he's going to be racing F2.
Yeah.
But who knows? We'll see how science feels.
You never know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
In qualifying.
Exactly. Anything can happen. Anything can happen in Formula One. And between now and then, I'm sure things will continue to develop.
I'm still going with my picks as Verstappen's going to win.
I agree. Verstappen's going to win, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Barring any
He's going to win.
catastrophe.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at the weather and to see what it looks like for if it's going to be a dry, wet race and stuff like that. But Albert Park's always a good one. So I can't wait to watch it and recap this with you next week.
Yeah. It's going to be good times.
Yeah.
Good times.
Well.
All right. Well, it was great talking today about all things F1.
And follow us, subscribe, comment.
You know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, on your platform.
On your platform. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Daniel.